Today we will talk about pedophilia in the Catholic Church. Why is this religion so famous for its terrible crimes? By the way, the investigation of the Special Commission shows that from 1950 to 2020 the French Catholic Church corrupted about 216,000 minors. About 80% of the victims were boys. For years, the Church has demonstrated deep, complete, and even cruel indifference in protecting itself, while it turned a blind eye to the victims, and sometimes deliberately linked children with predators. This commission was called for in 2018 by the Catholic bishops themselves in France, because their church faced such criticism and rejection that the issue of distrust in them and loss of authority had to be resolved somehow. Thus, a dependent commission was born, which prepared a document consisting of 2,500 pages. There is evidence, names, testimonies, articles, descriptions of crimes, and the number of victims is officially 216,000, not officially 330, and this is the largest scandal in the history of the Catholic Church. Subscribe to the channel, like and write comments for the development of this channel. The first mentions of sexual abuse of children began to be recorded in the 1950s, and only in the 1980s did they start talking about it. The first more or less loud discussions took place in Argentina, Australia, and Austria. It was there that the Archbishop of Vienna resigned in the 1990s due to accusations, but the Zeros became the starting point for the beginning of investigations into the crimes of the Church. In 2002, journalists from the American publication Boston Globe began digging under the Boston Diocese, and especially under their abuse of children. That same year, Catholics learned that in their religious world there was violence against minors by churchmen. After several months of painstaking research, journalists were able to identify 70 Boston priests, some of whom had raped several dozen children over the years, when it became clear that those priests who had molested children were not deprived of their rank, and some even escaped punishment. This problem began to be discussed en masse, and this prompted people not only in the USA but all over the world to start their own investigations, research, create commissions, and draw attention to violence against children in the Catholic Church. Gilbert Goff, a former Catholic priest from Louisiana who systematically raped 37 children, this has been officially proven. Unofficially, the number of his victims may exceed 100. He was sentenced to 20 years behind bars. He served 10, was released, sought a 3-year-old child, and sat down again. Well, or you can also remember John Geoghegan, a former Catholic priest of the Boston Diocese, who sexually abused 130 underage boys. He was sentenced to 10 years, but he died while in prison. After the report of Joshua Shapiro and his investigation, similar investigations began to appear in other states of the USA. For example, in the state of Illinois, it turned out that over a 70-year period, more than 450 priests had corrupted 1997 children, and all this time the Catholic Church hid the names of not only the victims but also their perpetrators. That is, they tried to bury this story, and one of the reasons why they are silent is that they expect that the crimes will be impossible to consider, since the statute of limitations for the crime will expire. Just so you understand, on average, after child abuse in the Catholic Church, victims report these cases as long as 23.5 years later. Imagine that after all the churchmen are just silent. They do not warn parishioners that the violence took place in their church, they do not warn about it, and pretend that nothing happened. Reports from the Illinois State Attorney say that some victims of sexual violence planned to commit suicide, used alcohol and drugs to overcome anxiety and feelings of worthlessness. Here are some of the moments that people who have experienced sexual violence in the church face: insomnia, anxiety, trust issues, nightmares, suicidal thoughts, guilt, alcoholism, depression, drug addiction, and the inability to live a normal sex life. And I won't be able to tell you how these investigations took place in every state or in every country, because as of today, the largest and most important investigations were conducted in Costa Rica, the Dominican Republic, El Salvador, Honduras, the USA, Canada, Mexico, Argentina, Bolivia, Chile, Colombia, India, Singapore, Austria, Australia, Belgium, Croatia, France, Germany, Ireland, Italy, Norway, Poland, Portugal, and Britain, and you can talk about each of them for hours telling about individual cases and stories of individual people. This is such a vast topic that you can start a separate YouTube channel under it. So let's talk about the causes of sexual violence. Back in the 11th century, The philosopher and theologian Peter Damianov wrote a treatise Liber Humorias against sodomy and similar abuses of the clergy. In this work, Damianov believed that the debauchery and lewd behavior of the clergy undermined church authority and set an example for the laity who would follow this whole story. But few people paid attention to his words and work, especially among the clergy. Back in the 1530s, Martin Luther said that cardinals should limit the number of boys they kept for their sexual pleasure, because thus Rome simply makes sodomy a normal phenomenon. For centuries the church tried to keep quiet about all these crimes, and this led to excessive secrecy, and it turned out that rape is possible. But quietly it is unpleasant and actually scary to admit, but that's how it is. So you never had a question, and why are accusations of crimes against children directed at Catholic priests? One of the most common answers is the celibacy of clergy. Look at the Orthodox elements. Their priests can get married and lead a secular life, but some Catholic ones, no. This decision has existed for over 900 years, and many Catholic priests have refused this rank because they are not ready to dedicate themselves to the Lord, and in return to give up sexual life, but not all of them did so. Therefore, some researchers believe that the celibate life of priests contributes to violence in the church. After all, for them, violence against underage boys is a way to circumvent church law. And to the question, why do children suffer? Because celibacy often begins in adolescence, therefore the victims are minors. We cannot exclude the fact that there are pedophiles among priests, as in any other profession, but there are no official statistics. But the biblical requirement of celibacy probably contributes to violence and pushes to commit a crime. This is not my opinion. Researchers believe so. Then the logical question arises. Why was it invented at all? In 1073 to 1805, with his decision on marriageability, Pope Gregory VII decided the issue of distributing the land property of a clergyman among his descendants. It's just that there are no descendants, there is no land, and this decision could have been changed, but it became a tradition, and in 1967 Pope Paul VI confirmed the inviolability of celibacy. So who are they, and why are crimes being committed? One of the reasons why the most is known about the crimes of the Catholic Church is the centralized hierarchy that is obliged to keep absolutely all records, and this allows not only the church authorities but also journalists, prosecutors, and even ordinary citizens to monitor church archives, and it is not just about a district, region, city, or country. These records allow us to create a picture of the world, which is why much more is known about the activities of Catholic clergy through criminals than about Orthodox or Protestants. It would also be fair to add that child molestation occurs not only in churches, but it is much easier to find evidence in a church than in a school because a school does not keep its archives of committed crimes. Unlike the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church itself, of course, in addition to covering up these crimes, there were also attempts to solve the problems and hold the perpetrators accountable. For example, immediately after its publication in the Boston Globe in 2002, the Dalek Charter appeared, a comprehensive set of procedures for considering allegations of sexual abuse of minors by Catholic clergy. The Charter also contains instructions on reconciliation, healing under accountability, and prevention of future violence. Seriously, at that time it was a completely pointless document that did not solve the problems, so it was changed several times in 2005 to 2011. In 2018, the ineffectiveness of the case review also lay in the fact that the investigation was carried out in the Vatican. Well, there it all depended on who was friends with whom inside. Pope Francis came to power in 2013 and immediately called for decisive action. But his critics still believe that he did and is not doing enough to address the issues of violence against children. In the Catholic Church, for example, in 2019 he wrote a letter in which he discussed making changes to traditional religious law, that is, a criminal can be removed from the clergy for 12 months, and again criticized in 2020, the Holy See began its own investigation, important in the case of Cardinal Theodore McCarrick, who was accused of sexual abuse of children, and the former Pope John Paul II also got into trouble for this, because he rejected or denied the accusations against the cardinal. And the worst thing is that even despite the accusations, Theodore McCarrick was able to climb the church career ladder in the ranks. John Paul II appointed him Archbishop of Washington, and then promoted him to cardinal. The cardinal eventually resigned in 2018. Pope John Paul II was criticized for not taking action in response to reports of sexual abuse by Theodore McCarthy, despite the Pope himself saying that those who harm children have no place in the Church. Nevertheless, in 2019, the Catholic Church held a truly unprecedented summit dedicated to pedophilia, and the conference was called The Protection of Children in the Church, and the heads of all national episcopal confessions from over 130 countries took part in it. Terrible things were said there. One woman from Africa said that she was forced to have 3 abortions as a teenager because she was regularly subjected to violence by a priest who did not want to use contraception, and a man from Asia said that he alone was raped more than 100 times. Pope Francis came out and promised to bring all those involved to justice. Did it work out? Of course. No, even more, some of his words significantly angered both journalists and the victims of sexual violence themselves. At the end of this issue, I would like to say that the only way is to teach your children, engage in their sexual education from an early age, talk to them, listen to them, so that these crimes, if they have already occurred, are reported. Children spoke immediately, and not after decades, when it may already be too late. And it is worth remembering the following: there are no bad religions. There are bad people who, hiding under God, commit terrible crimes. And I thank you for watching this video to the end. Put your fingers up, your fingers down, comment, share this video, and be sure to subscribe to the channel to help it develop.